Okay, standby systems look good. Let's give this a go. Left arm. Cool. Right arm. All right, all right. And I can't not press the artillery button. Oh! I should have definitely opened up the hatch before pressing that. That's going to be costly. Where's a post-it note? Oh, hey everyone, and welcome to Groove Builders, the show where we create together. I'm your host, Disorderlycone, and in this episode, we're going to be building MU Thor's Armour and telling you everything you need to know to get this thing complete. Like, what are the tricky bits? What tools are you going to need, and how it actually all goes together? Being that this is one of the trickier builds and probably one of the biggest builds we've done here on the channel, there's quite a lot to go through, and we've actually have a 4-part series explaining all the build and all of its details. With mo parts typically comes mo problems. Or is that the case for the MU Thor's Armour? I guess the only way to find out is to go back in time to where this whole thing began to see how it unfolds. Why don't I cue you guys up for that, and I'll meet you guys on the other side once I figure out how to get out of here. See you there. And boom, just like that, we begin building the MU Thor's Armour. And I know what you're thinking, how did you get out of that mech suit? And the answer is actually this little mini disc player here full of early 2000s Christian rock. Yeah, I didn't really see that coming either, but nevertheless, it worked. And before we get too far, we really should talk about the tools for this kit, starting off with our nippers. These are great for cutting out all of our pieces, especially because we're dealing with so many of them. We're going to need to ensure to get right up close to the part before cutting. Not doing this will leave a little bit of metal on your piece, and this is called a burr. These burrs get in the way of all of our parts connecting together correctly, and it can lead to some details looking a little bit all wonky and goofy. You don't want that. You want laser sharp bends and connections as well. And the best way of doing that is to make sure you have some good nippers. The next thing I'm going to recommend is a classic tool that I'm sure all of you are familiar with, and that is our pliers. These are great for shaping the majority of our pieces because they have a really nice little spiked edge there, and they also are completely smooth on the inside. This means that as we're bending all of our pieces, we're not marking them up, and I definitely recommend getting a good set of these. Another tool that's great for bending some of our pieces is our classic tweezers. These are a detailed tweezer part, or I should say part of a detailed tweezer set, and they are great for bending all of our pieces, and of course with their long edges here you can actually bend the part inside and use it as a mini brake. These are fantastic and I highly recommend you getting them as well. Another tool that's used, but you might see me use it sparingly, is a tab bending tool. This tool is great for, of course, securing all of our tabs, whether it be twisting or bending them, but it also provides us with a really nice center here for us to be able to shape all of our cylindrical pieces, or at least some of the smaller ones. Another tool that you might use for this would be these. These are a dapping tool, or I should say a part of a dapping set. And they are great for bending all of our pieces around the center here for cylindrical bend, or of course putting them into a block for a nice doming effect here with the little balls on the end. They come in a wide variety of shapes and sizes, and because of that, they really are good for getting some of the more difficult pieces that we're going to be bending a little bit later on. Now, of course, these are just our recommendations, and you really don't need anything but nippers and tweezers to be able to build the entire kit. But of course, having all of these tools will make life so much easier for you. All right, now we've talked tools, let's get into the build. Yep, I'm back rather quickly, and that's because I want to talk about instructions. These are not your typical 4-page back and front instructions. The MU team here has developed an entire novel for the Thor's armor build, and they're actually quite detailed. I mean, just take a look at these pictures up here. Very clear, easy to understand. The only problem that I have, though, is that there's no indication on how to secure your tabs, whether that be a twist or a bend. For the majority of the time, I was able to use my intuition and it got me through. And where parts got a little bit more intricate, I decided to look ahead in the instructions to see if those things were going to get in the way. I highly recommend doing this if you're building this model here, especially because of all the different intricate details. But one other thing I want to talk about when it comes to our tabs is that these are very unique. With MU tabs, about halfway down on them, there's a little bit of a ball. And this little ball provides almost a confirmation that the pieces have been fully seated in place once you take the tab and put it into the insertion hole. It's almost a clicking motion, and I love that because it really gave me a sense of knowing that the part is in place exactly where it was supposed to be. And because we have a little bit of extra metal there when it comes to securing the tab, it feels that much more secure. Now, I know that not all 3D metal model companies can adapt this practice, but man, I would absolutely love it. I just think that some of the metal might not be able to take that little extra added force. Anyway, let's get into the little more difficult details. Okay, those kind of look like legs. As you've seen so far, the majority of the detail we've been working with has just been boxes. Lots and lots of different shaped boxes. But it's super important to make sure that as we're shaping all of these boxes, that all of the edges meet. And sometimes when we actually shape the parts to where they kind of are supposed to go, you'll notice that one of those little edges will kind of pop out like this. If you're having this problem, I highly recommend kind of slightly over bending that one little half, and you'll find that when it bounces back, it'll be right touching the other piece. And this can pretty much be done for all of the pieces that we're going to be encountering, especially some of the smaller hexagonal pieces. Speaking of those, we can actually look at this layered detail piece right here to get a good understanding of what I'm talking about. When it comes to this here, we want to shape the smaller pieces first and then add them onto the big piece. The reason for this is if we actually shape the big piece first, we're not going to be able to get some of the tabs on the inside, or at least they'll be very difficult to get. So to avoid all of that hassle, we're going to shape these little petals here first, make sure they're all nice and lined up, attach them into the big piece, and boom, just like that, we can begin building the outer housing. Very, very cool. And if you understand this basic principle, this model is actually pretty simple to build. That was one thing about this build that I was really surprised about, was actually how easy it was, how simplistic it was to be able to get all the parts together. There's just a lot of them, and a few tricky parts. Oh, highlight details. These are scattered throughout our instructions, and trying to get these into place sometimes can be a little tricky. My best advice is to line up the part first to see where everything is going to go. Then you want to go ahead and just bend those tabs just a little bit and try to put them both into place at the same time, or at least as many tabs as possible in at the same time. This will avoid us kind of stretching the part to get it into place, and that's a fight you really don't want to have. This can actually warp the pieces or possibly break them if we're not careful. But later on, when we're getting into some more of the 3D kind of layered detail like this one right here, we're going to need to bend every single one of those pedals and then get the basic shape. Bend the tabs and then try to work them one by one into place. Again, you might find yourself kind of stretching this just a little bit, and a little bit of a stretch is okay, but too much will warp this piece. So make sure you take your time and you're patient with this bit, and you'll get it into place. Okay, cylindrically coney shapes. These ones can be tricky too, especially if you don't have the right tools like I do here with my mandrill. What we do is we just kind of push the part into our tool to get a basic shape. And if you have a marker at home, like those big Crayola ones, that's a great substitute for not having a dapping set. Now, because these have a little bit of an angle on them, once we get that basic cylindrical shape, we're gonna grab our tweezers and give it a little bit of a twist as we go around to meet the two edges. This will get us the cone shape that we need in this particular piece. Now, one other thing we need to know is we don't want to close this up. I made a mistake a couple of times and closed mine before putting the other details in place first. And getting the tabs is possible. You can reach in and, use different tools to do that, but you really don't want to struggle here. So my suggestion, double check the instructions before actually building any of these pieces. And of course, leave the pieces open if they have other different pieces of detail going onto them. And it's a struggle that you just don't need. Artillery guns. Now these are cool and go together quite easily, but they do have some moving parts that we have to be concerned about. Now when it comes to these moving pieces, it really relies on you and how well you shape the bottom track, and of course ensure that there's no leftover metal on the pieces. And when we take a look at this here, we can actually see how well they move by taking the part and moving it back and forth. If it gets caught, you know that there's something a little bit awry. The track itself needs to be a perfect square, just like this. And at the end, when we're putting that little back piece on the gun there, you can see how well your tabs line up. If any of them are completely out of whack from where they're supposed to be at the insertion hole, you know that you have a little bit more shaping to do. Once you put that back on and secure everything together, you can again take that little piece back and forth and see how well it moves. If it gets caught, take another look to see what's out of shape. Try to make some adjustments, and then you should be good. It might take a little bit of time, but patience here is key to getting this thing to work correctly. And boom, there we have it, MU Thor's armor in all of its glory. Yeah, this was a long time coming, and I have to admit, it feels like an accomplishment to be able to hold it in my hand here. But I also have to say that I thought it was going to be a little bit bigger. I mean, it's very kind of compact, if you will. There's a ton of parts in here, and the more you look at it, you actually see a lot more detail. And that's because everything is layered in here quite well. One thing I didn't do, though, was use the, I guess, stickers that are supposed to come with this. They're actually on the part sheet. So if you're going to install them as you go with this build, you're going to run into a problem where you're not going to know where the parts are you're going to be trying to get. And that's because those stickers are there. Now, again, does it take away from the model? No. Would it add to it? Absolutely. And that's because of all the really cool colors here. But when it comes to actually the model itself, there's some pretty cool features. It actually has a spinning turret here that goes 360. It can get caught pretty easily because of how the tabs are just kind of resting there. It's a weird kind of motion of how that works. But the other part here that moves are the artillery guns here on the back. And they move just by kind of pulling them up like this and putting them into place. Most of mine actually go quite easily. It's just this back one right here that gives me a little bit of trouble. And that's why I said when we were doing the instructions there, it's kind of important to double check and make sure that everything lines up correctly when you're doing these, just so they work really nice and easily. But yeah, look at that. The artillery guns are ready to go. And I have to admit, being able to hold a character from a game that I played in high school is really cool. And building it was quite easy too, which is kind of a surprise. The kit is huge and super big, and just looking at it is super intimidating. But actually building it, this model was kind of easy, which is a really nice change. With the amount of parts we did here, with the amount of layering, it was a complete pleasure to build. And I can actually recommend this for anyone at any skill level. If this is your first metal model, you're in for a lot. But if you've actually built a couple, this might be a nice challenge for you. It has a ton of pieces, like I said, a crazy amount of build time. I mean, I think I have over 20 hours of recorded footage. And again, when you're done, you have a model that's really cool and will definitely stand out in your collection. Alright, Groovers, that brings us to the end of our episode. I had a really good time building the MU Thor's armor with you, and if you guys had a good time, don't forget to press that like button, especially if you're one of these people that has been poking me over the years to build this guy. I really have to thank you too. Until next time, keep building. Alright, now it's time to go put this up and maybe shoot off those artillery guns again. That was a lot of fun.